Hello, packages, parsers, and programs. You want March Madness? Come to San Francisco. It's RSAC Conference Week. The extra C is for crazy. Consider, a basketball court is less than 5,000 square feet. Moscone exhibition space, over 500,000. You, like the Final Four, try navigating a crowd of 44,000. Admittedly, RSAC will have a lot more traveling and no mandatory timeouts. Instant replay will be instead weeks of unsubscribing from vendor mailing lists, but at least people will still talk in acronyms and random metrics. And so, this week, we talk with Erik Nost about the principles behind proactive security and why anything is better than patching our way out of AppSec. Do some stretches and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Zero Trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default deny and execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold. Trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's Zero Trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/threatlocker. Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs. Resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today. This is episode 375, recorded March 11th, 2026, but releasing it during RSAC week. It's that magic of Monday. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with John Kinsella, also magical. Hello, John.
RSA, or as I refer to it, the InfoSec version of Death March with Cocktails.
Death March with Cocktails. Oh, I'll be having a lot of coffee because I'll be there all week hanging out in Broadcast Alley. So no need to announce discount codes this week for RSAC. Sorry, that announcement is over. But if you do want to see what we're doing, what all the Security Weekly group is doing this week, come visit the live stream. Go check out securityweekly.com/RSAC. And that brings us to our guest. Erik Nost is a senior analyst at Forrester, serving security and risk professionals. His coverage includes proactive security, vuln management, exposure management, attack surface management, all the managements, and continuous security testing. Erik helps orgs build strategies to increase cybersecurity maturity and decrease risks in their environment. Hello, Erik. Thank you for joining us.
What's up? So happy to be here. How you guys doing?
We're doing quite well, and I feel like because of the topic, I just have to ask this up front and be proactive. What the heck is proactive security?
Well, it's anything you want it to be, right? We've had a million different kinds of iterations of proactive security within our environments within our programs for the past 20, 30 years, or since security's been a discipline here. And you can break it down to, well, are we being proactive or reactive? Are we doing assessments pre-boom, post-boom? You're walking around RSA this week, you're going to see that. You're going to see that in all the booths. We are a pre-boom, we are a post-boom vendor. So the way I think about proactive security is, what are you doing up until that moment of boom? And that doesn't change. That's how we've always done security. And by thinking about it as a proactive program, you're future-proofing what is always going to be a discipline within what you need to do.
I definitely want to pick apart some of that more, but I think let's build a bit more of the case about our working definition here of proactive security. I've got a blog post from you that's talking about 3 principles, 6 questions. I'm a fan of math. This is good, but break down what these principles are that you're calling out as that are good if you're being proactive.
Yeah, so if you look at what encompasses proactive security programs, it's always been what do we have in our environment that needs protection? So what visibility do we have and what visibility do we not have? From there, that's the prerequisite that you need to enact a prioritization strategy. So now that we have an idea of what's in our environment, what our attack surface is, what are we going to do to protect it? Is it adequately protected? Do we have the right controls? Are the controls appropriate based on the risks that this tech stack might have? But the often ignored and the most difficult principle out of all of these is remediation, because we might have an idea of what we need to protect. We might have an idea of how we're going to prioritize all of these signals, but now we need to fix these things. Now we need to have patch management. Now we need to update our code. Now we need to implement more controls based on risks that we've assessed, and that's where the biggest opportunities lie within the future of proactive security, so we can speed up and enhance remediation and response process around assess risk.
And that's where I want to pick apart those, actually going backwards, actually starting on that remediation, because I feel like there's a huge trap of we'll patch faster, we'll respond to our third-party dependencies and keep them up to date faster. Our vuln scanning will find and fix really fast. That still feels really reactive, and we're just here's a bug bounty report, we fixed it. Here's the next one, we fixed it. How is that not reactive, or how does that become proactive? What can we do better? This doesn't seem to be working for the last 20 years, kind of as you were alluding.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the control environment, I think. So are we assessing the applications and our workloads and our endpoints appropriately within our environment? Are we emulating the types of threats that can impact these appropriately as well? And then are we implementing the right controls around whether we are mitigating the impact and the likelihood of the types of attacks that could occur as a result of that? A big problem with the remediation processes as a whole, it comes down, Mike, to control, right? Because security teams, they control one of the principles of prioritization. They can kind of control the visibility aspect based on whether they're collecting the right signals and they have buy-in from the teams to do scans and collect the data that they need to build that prioritization strategy. But Mike, they don't control remediation, right? So when I said earlier, there's the opportunity within the proactive security market to improve the remediation processes. It's really around how we're responding to and implementing the things that security teams can control. So can we add IPS rules? Can we, ensure we're looking at monitoring on more the reactive side? So we have an idea around when these threats that we've assessed are actually coming to fruition. Do we have visibility on that as well? And are we adding preventative controls, looking at our zero trust strategy as well?
Yeah, and I think part of talking about the controls does resonate with me in the sense of, did we kill off this vuln class, which then takes my mind to what's different between proactive security, and why not just call this security by design, secure by default? Is there any difference there?
Well, we want everything to be secure by design and secure by default, right?
Fair.
But it doesn't change the reality. So secure by design that's the ambition. That's the ambitious claim that we've been looking to make forever. But the reality is that we have end-of-life systems. We have legacy code bases. We have all these artifacts in our environment that are going to make what a modern enterprise is made up of And we still need to collect the right visibility and understand how those things interact with one another to look at the control environment and so on. So do we reach a world where everything is secure by design and we don't need to look at assess end of life systems and all the legacy stuff that we've had in our environments forever? We've been thinking this for what, 10, 15 years now. Right, that we would reach this plane, and it doesn't reflect the reality of what most organizations are dealing with.
Yeah, I guess part of that is, I want to, I want to believe that secure by design exists, is achievable, and even when that's legacy environments, it does feel like having that visibility, prioritization, a little bit of, I'll use your phrase, before the boom or a boom has happened. Even with legacy systems, I would hope, and I imagine this is what you're pitching, is that proactive security is, how was this legacy system compromised? Could we have contained that better? This isn't the idea of attacks are always going to happen, but if an attack does happen, it's tamping down the impact. I think if I'm trying to be succinct, which is always a struggle, how do we tamp down the impact, even for legacy systems? Is that what this proactive security means? Or am I just saying risk management and we need to be calling this risk management?
In a sense, yeah. I mean, when we talk about risk management, we're talking about likelihood, we're talking about impact at the end of the day. And that's what, modern proactive security exposure management type solutions are really providing at their core. They're telling you the likelihood that an event could potentially happen. Now, impact is much more difficult because if you think about, likelihood, they're a lot more objective in nature. Yes, there's this vulnerability, and we've proven it's there. Yes, we ran a pen test, we ran a red team, and we've proven it can be exploited. But the impact of that attack being carried out, it's not necessarily known until it hits the fan, right? Well, we don't know all the supply chain dependencies necessarily until you have a whole database encrypted. You don't know what the downstream effects will necessarily be until you're actually dealing with a real event. So assessing the impact of these things, if likelihood is objective, impact's a lot more subjective, and that's where factoring that into your prioritization strategy, it can be a lot more difficult. Based on what someone's view of an impact may or may not be.
So let me try and squeeze something in here, like before the leaf blower comes back outside from me. One of the things we covered in the news last week was the 0-day clock. I'm not sure if you've seen that, Eric, but like the idea, what we're seeing is that the time distance between when a CVE is published and when that thing starts to get popped in the wild is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. How can you be proactive when that time window is becoming so small?
Yeah, well, that's where we talk about more continuous visibility on what you have. The proactive principles still apply in that scenario. You need to know whether or not you have that CVE in your environment, and this is where having ad hoc scanning every week doesn't do you any good. We need continuous visibility, collecting all these signals to know, do these signals match up to what we see happening in the wild? Because once that's happening in the wild, I talked about likelihood earlier, that likelihood goes from an uncertain likelihood to, yes, we are 100% certain this is a real threat. And as that CVE, that 0-day clock ticks down, collecting that visibility on a more continuously becomes that much more important. The impact to that might not matter, and that's the whole other conversation. So, knowing whether something is a real threat in the wild, as we're looking at threat intelligence and other types of signals around the known exploits and attacks that are truly there, helps to build the likelihood around something that we would need to respond to. The impact might not necessarily matter to your organization, even if that threat is a real tangible threat that we're monitoring, and we have obvious insights into.
Part of that, I want to build on that aspect in the sense of the visibility part. Now, I'm going to jump from remediation over to visibility, because what you described too sounds to me a little bit of, hey, get your bingo cards, that exciting topic of asset inventory or app inventory, or, whatever shadow fill in the blank that is, it's shadow AI these days now too. So it definitely sounds appealing to me. Just know what you have. That's what you start with. So that's one step, but how, is that sufficient to be proactive? If I'm in org and I'm working against that 0-day clock, and I can say, oh, well, it's 1.6 days on average for a CVE to get popped, and I can patch in 3 days, I have a window of exposure there, but that feels like that's not fully proactive. How do I know as an org I am being proactive, so to speak?
That's why we need to think about all three principles as well. Because that visibility is not enough, because you need to have a comprehensive prioritization strategy that makes sense as you're collecting that visibility. We're approaching a world where that 0-day clock is within seconds for all the CVEs that are out there, and that's a reality. Like we are going to see that in our careers. We will see that. Maybe not this year, but within the next few years, likely, and that means that your prioritization strategy has to consider all the impact and the likelihood of these these vulnerabilities that are being exploited, because it's not going to be a world where, is this vulnerability potentially exploited? No, this vulnerability is being exploited, but it comes down to, well, does it actually matter for my environment? Which makes prioritization that much more important. But Mike, to do prioritization, you have to be collecting the visibility. So all these principles intersect, between one another, and how well you do each one influences how well you do the other ones.
And that's in a lot of what you're describing too is very much kind of systems thinking. In other words, here's a one component that's exploited. What is the boom related to that? Is it a big one? Is it a small one, et cetera? I want to narrow down the focus for a second on, I think that systems thinking should very much fall into application security, product security type of thinking, but I'm going to narrow it to an API or the app and just the code itself. So we will introduce, part of the gist behind that 0-day clock was also the idea that, hey, the attacker cost of developing exploits is going down because of, drumroll please, LLMs. Everybody knew what I was going to say there. So on the defender side, if we're also using our Claudes or whatevers, is that making us more proactive? Or are we just spending tokens to because everybody else is spending tokens and we just have token war these days?
Token war. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. There's a tricky balance there, because as we're developing the tools to detect new vulnerabilities, a lot of those tools become available for adversaries and other folks that might not be doing it for the good of your organization or the security community, per se. So there's kind of this it's kind of this tipping point around, as we're accelerating vulnerability discovery, we need to be using the same type of vulnerability discovery. We need to be thinking about vulnerability discovery the same way an adversary would, because if someone external to the organization can discover a 0-day, can discover a vulnerability that isn't necessarily cataloged, then you should be using those same tools as well. And I think we're just continuing to accelerate towards a world where the scale and the speed that we need to do those things is going to just continue to increase.
Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter, METER. Now I want to pull you around on that for a second, because obviously we've seen on a lot of research already, a lot of blog posts. We've covered a lot of this in the news within the past month about LLMs, Gen AI being used to identify vulnerabilities, and that's what you're just talking about. That still feels like we're inescapably gravitating towards that reactive side of things. What about the LLMs on the proactive side? You were talking about likelihood and impact. Can I just say, hey, dear Gen AI, what's the impact going to be if component foo gets popped?
Yes and no. It depends on the type of assessments you've done prior. Now, I talked earlier about how impact is subjective to, depending on who you ask. So are we going to trust AI agents' subjectivity on whether something's important or not? Most organizations will say no. Well, we've done business impact analysis. We have a whole strategy around what we think and know is important. But the challenge with that is those aren't necessarily machine-readable documents that an AI agent can assess and build into its impact assessment. So one of the things I tell security leaders to start thinking about is, how do you make the subjective context machine readable? Because they can't implant in your brain yet. They're not sitting at board meetings and strategy meetings just yet to understand all the things that are important to what's happening in the business right now. But to add that subjectivity and build that impact assessment out, what is important to your organization, it needs to be machine readable for these agents at some point. And we're not talking about CMDB tags, and we're not talking about, no, this asset is critical. We're talking about, these are important business processes based on our strategic and our tactical objectives in the organization. And it is an interesting opportunity to improve prioritization if and when those things are machine readable. And I think most organizations don't have that impact assessment in a way that agents can assess and access.
Because I was going to ask about that machine readable part, because it sounds like, these days, here's a text file, or just here's the transcript of a wonderful Application Security Weekly episode that an LLM could train on. But, when you're saying machine readable, I'm going to guess it's more about a document has to exist that has useful context or useful information. Am I right there? What does actually machine readable mean for an AI agent in this case?
Well, for an AI agent, yeah, they can parse any text doc or anything that's made available. But the challenge, Mike, is I don't think that document even exists in a lot of organizations. Do organizations even have that defined anywhere? Consistently?
Yeah, they'll get around to it once they finish their asset inventory, right? So yeah,
exactly, right.
It's on the list.
Yeah. So that's more where I'm heading is, to make it machine readable, it's not that much of a challenge based on what LLMs can do today. It's not documented, it's not consistent, and it's not defined.
So what you're saying is people have to work to have proactive security. We can't just coast. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just the security teams either. It's the whole business. Everyone's responsible for this. And that's the CISO challenge to begin with. Evangelizing security as this is everyone's responsibility, not just the security teams. And that's a million other podcasts. That's not just this one. Yeah.
That's okay. We got RSA. We'll go through and figure out how many vendors are in each one. There's going to at least be a million different pitches that people run into this week. In that spirit of, so you were just talking about, machine readable, which is really just translated to this documentation has to exist for context for impact likelihood to be understood. And honestly, set aside the whole LLM aspect, it sounds like, I think it's safe to say any org should at least have a degree of that, whatever level of maturity they're at. It's not because you need to feed this into LLM, it's because you need to have that for visibility, for risk management. So let me take you now to the other side of or another factor here. What if we're feeding context into a coder, Claude, for example, that's building proactive security, or here's the other metaphors or synonyms here, is building secure by design, or it is avoiding, it's adding those controls that you were describing right at the top of the interview. Can we just give, our LLM the context and say, here, write some code, but be proactive about the security? Have we just, got our $1 billion AI pitch right there?
Maybe a couple million, but maybe not a billion.
I can settle. That's at least a Lambo. I can go with that.
Again, I think that's tricky in that one, it needs to be well defined and accessible, but you also don't want, say you're using cloud code, and you tell cloud code, this thing needs to be secure. There's also the angle of, well, does it? Are we going to add all of our most expensive controls and have continuous monitoring on this thing when it's just some informational, web page or something out there that's not actually impactful to how we are doing things, or there's no there's no attack vector that can proliferate from that point. So I think there's also an element of assessing risk from a cost perspective, that you don't need to add the most enhanced security for everything that you're using to build, depending on what it is. But to know that, you still need the impact. You still need to know what the trickle down effect is, and you still need to know the likelihood. Still need to understand, this thing might look inconsequential, but it actually can expose other assets and other applications and other types of attacks within the organization. So you still need the continuous monitoring on it to know whether or not you need to spend more than necessary on how secure it is.
You're making me think of, there was a blog post, I want to say about 6 weeks ago out there, of some guy, I believe it was a guy he had a loop with Claude Code, and it'd say, with a little bit of application he had, just make it more secure, make the code better, make the code better, make the code better. And the robot would just keep spinning and spinning and find different ways to try and make this thing better, and right? I'd love to see the clone of that for security, just see how much can it sort of actually spin down to death. And
make it more secure, make it more secure. It's not helpful, but, and then,
yes.
But then it's just not usable.
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious. It boils down to a Pascal line of code that's hello world. I would love to see this. Yes. So I think so Eric, you've walked us through, I think prioritization, we haven't touched on that explicitly, but I think that fits in very much your emphasis on the likelihood, the impact. Maybe one last question I'll squeeze in there around that is, AppSec, InfoSec, I think more generally, very much more of an art than a science when we get into the likelihood and the impact. I will use the word vibe because that's that's in the zeitgeist these days. So we've had vibe metrics for a long time, even if we haven't called it that. Have you seen effective, less effective ways of having that likelihood and risk, or likelihood and impact being expressed, being documented, that at least are lead to better strategies, or lead to inform better decisions for this type of proactive security that we would love to see?
I think there's been some recent examples of the past couple of years, but they won't be, tenable, as the 0-day clock continues to tick down, and that's really around KEVs. It's known exploits. A lot of organizations shifted prioritization strategies 2 years ago from CVSS to, well, is it on a KEV? Is this an externally accessible asset, and so on. But we're going to see more and more caps. And then we're just back into the same boat that we were in with CVSS. Now everything's critical. And that's where the impact likelihood becomes even more, important. So yeah, like there are methods that I encourage people to think about. Something known to be exploited, and it's accessible, and it's externally accessible, and it has an impact to your organization. Yeah, that's going to factor into prioritization. But like there's only a matter of time before that model starts to have the same challenges we've had with CVSS and other prioritization methods.
Yeah, and to be transparent, I even love Kev because it addresses the volume problem. And as you pointed out, it's like these are actually known to be exploited, meaning the attacker cost is pretty darn low. They're automating it or they're scripting it, etc. So at least patch those if they impact you. In the spirit of being proactive, before I throw one last question on you, I want to see, John, anything else that you want to jump in here and that we should ask Erik about?
Sorry. I mean, I think from my point of view, I love the idea. One of the thoughts in my head, and I've asked this to other people in the past, is that depending on the customer or maybe even the industry, I'm not sure how relevant everything we're talking about is, right? So just start from most recently. There's a lot of people who haven't even touched an LLM yet. Okay, fine. You mentioned IDS there about close to half an hour ago, Erik. I'm like, wow, I haven't touched an IDS in like years. So I think it's in that part of the trick here is how do we, and I guess it's the proactiveness is for each individual or each organization to sort of figure out what tools do they have and then what do they do with it. Does that does that resonate?
It does, yeah, and that's what you see happening in the market, John. So a lot of the project security platforms that are out there, whether it's an attack surface management solution or exposure management solution, they're really broadening the definition of asset, and they're not just endpoint centric anymore. They're including identities, they're including applications, they're including your cloud workloads. And some are including, the funkier stuff like IoT, MIoT, like stuff like that. So when you start expanding, that definition of an asset and what makes up your attack surface, I'd say the opportunity to look at, well, what is where can we inject a control changes as well. Because there might be an attack in an application that is fine for it to materialize up until it hits a certain database or up until it hits a certain type of asset, and that's where, as we're expanding that definition of asset, our definition of control expands as well, and that's what you see happening in the market. You see prioritization shifting from not just vulnerability centric and not asset centric, but what's the remediation and what's the action that we actually need to take here to mitigate and maybe remove what that threat and that impact is, to what we've modeled for an attack.
Yeah, and that feels like one of the easiest. This is, again, I'm cribbing from CISA. They also talk about one of the ways you could be proactive, deploy passkeys, FIDO keys for human authentication. And that way we can either talk about all the different phishing and anti-phishing solutions and phishing training, but if we minimize credential theft based attacks, we've already been really proactive. And there's obviously a cost there, but that feels like one of those costs that's well spent to then go figure out the visibility and all the other vendors that are on the floor of RSA. Maybe I lied. I'm going to have two questions. Erik, as a takeaway, we had your 6 questions, the who, what, when, whys, wheres, hows, for these 3 principles. Is there one thing, or how should an organization get started on being proactive? And here I'm very much on what's that proactive part, and not just we're doing vulnerability scanning and we know what the vulns are.
Yeah, man, I wish I could answer that simply. So let me think about the simplest way.
We only have 30 seconds left. Yeah. Squeeze it in quick.
All right. So what tells you, what helps gives you visibility? You also need to know the when to know whether or not it's important. We need to know where on an attack path this thing is important to help prioritize. And the better we can, the better we can answer why this is something we need to prioritize, the better you're prioritizing. The next element around that is around, well, who needs to fix it? And the better we can answer who needs to fix it, the better we're going to know how do we fix it, and vice versa. So that's where I'm heading with the 6 questions that you need to ask yourself, and they all tie back to those principles we talked about today as well.
They do, and I really do enjoy that answer, because that where on the attack path, in my mind, helpfully translates into the paved road, the guardrails, that type of concept. And I think you pointed out too, but I really wanted to emphasize, who is fixing this isn't necessarily security, but it should hopefully be informed by the security team, aided by the security team, etc. So it's a wonderful message that I appreciate you bringing to us. There is, however, another message that we always ask our guests, and that is, you gave us 3 principles, but we need to distill your opinion on what AppSec is in 3 words.
Secure your apps. Yeah. Since I'm limited to 3 words, I would say it's where there's a focus on the application world here, and I think you can apply the 3 principles of proactive security to the AppSec world very specifically. Do we have visibility on our applications? What is our prioritization strategy within that, and how are we tracking and augmenting response to what we've detected as well? So I could also say visibility, prioritization, remediation.
A bunch of commas in there. That makes it works. It's 3 words. I love it. Thank you so much, Erik. I guess will we see you at RSAC this week?
No, unfortunately, I cannot make it, but I do have some wonderful colleagues that are going to give some awesome speeches. I encourage you to all check out Jeff Pollard, Jess Byrne, Madeleine van der Hout, and I'm sure I have other colleagues that'll be giving some speeches at RSA, and I apologize for missing them, but I do have a lot of awesome colleagues giving some awesome talks at RSA, and go check them out, please. They're brilliant.
And we've had a lot of your awesome colleagues here on the show too. And this is the first time we had you. And so I want to thank you for an awesome conversation, Erik. This was fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us. Please remember to subscribe, check out the show notes, and share on the socials. And speaking of being proactive in a world of better security, check out Euphoric Dream by Morgan Willis. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly. Enjoy RSA.